I have to chuckle. Um, I use AI to ask questions and I'll compare different AIs together. I'll even go to Google and say, hey, how about this? And I'll even do some of my own research and I'll compare it. And sometimes it varies widely. And this is one of these topics. And I got deceived when Trump was running for president and the Democrats were trying to equate Project 2025 with Donald Trump. And I thought, well, there's a lot of things there, Project 2025, I agree with. But I was reading superficial summaries that were not detailed, misrepresented the bulk of what was being said, and it's been captured in a book. And I'm going to give you the book here. You can go look at it yourself. Excuse me. It's 2025 Scenario of U.S. and Global Society Reshaped by Science and Technology. Reshaped. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the entire Science and Technology Board was fired by President Trump and all the tech bros associated with Thiel and Altman on that board. Surprise, surprise. You like the word reshaped in the title? Because we are reshaping society as we know it right now. This reshaping, I think, is going to be much bigger than what we saw when we went from an agricultural nation into the Industrial Revolution. And I think it's going to be far quicker. That transition took decades, the previous one. This one's going to take maybe a year or two at the most. And let me mention this before I talk about our sponsor. This is really important. I mean, this is really important. I have a list of facts here that I've gathered now from looking at the document. I asked AI for a summary specifically on the areas I found that were concerning. And I got a lot of really wishy-washy, don't want to answer you, sidebar anecdotes, nonsense that didn't fully address. And I tried to narrow it down. And AI was like the worm you try to grab. It just keeps squiggling and moving. And it wouldn't promptly address what I wanted it addressed. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have to break this into two parts. And the first part is going to be what this book of 502 pages published in 1997. Obviously, it was developed in 1996. So we're talking about 30 years old of predictions they said they anticipated would happen by 2025. Well, these predictions, when you use timelines, they vary, but they're very close to being on schedule. They won't be off by more than 3 or 4 years, in my estimation, with what's happening. And we're going to talk about what they have predicted that have come true. And in part two, we're going to look at what they have predicted. And you can certainly see it on the horizon, but it hasn't yet fully arrived. And I think we need to look at this as a warning. And I'm going to say this, if you're a constitutional loving American, and particularly if you're a Christian and you have strong family ties and values and you believe in all that, this could keep you up at night. But I just want to remind you where the scripture says, fear not. You'll never be handed more than you can handle. And I think that we all need to remain consistently in prayer, colleague, and network with each other, because I think the future is not immutable. I think it's moldable by our collective action. And you just think of the man that got swallowed by the whale. You know who I'm talking about? Name starts with a J. Go look it up. He went and he rebuked Nineveh. Could have put him to death. He refused the job, first of all, got swallowed by a whale. And he goes back and they all repented and converted to the God of Israel. It's Old Testament. Nineveh was really the primary metropolitan area of that age. Pretty interesting development. Well, we can have the same kind of transformation here. So fear not as I go into this. Let me just say to you quite honestly, though, that we are looking at a situation that I think that we need to be concerned about. What you should also be concerned with is the reshaping of your health. And I was fairly healthy, 2.5 years ago. And then boom, pneumonia, RSV, strep lung linings, Dave, those lung linings aren't coming back. Curtains for you. This is all over. You're in decline, and I'm better now than I've been in 25 years. What changed? What changed was the nanosoma liquid spray that boosted my immune system to unbelievable levels. If you go to iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges, you'll get a description. They also have the gel you rub on your joints. Grows pluripotent stem cells. Over 30 research studies validating this. And over time, you're going to find the inflammation and subsequent pain go away. Today, I'm doing things in the gym and in regular life I hadn't done in years. And then there's a skin cream for cuts and burns. Together, it's the starter pack, 15% off. Act now while you still can get it at this price. Again, go to iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges. iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges. We certainly want our health back. And that's being threatened. And some of that will come out in what I'm going to tell you. And I took some copious notes here I'm going to refer to, but I want to get into who funded this book. It's pretty interesting. This is a short list. This is not inclusive. The Aspen Institute. You know anything about them? Oh, yeah, they tried to convert Charlie. And that's where that AI deep fake video about Charlie surfaced. I appoint Erica Kirk. We all know that's AI fake nonsense. And it's history anyway, it doesn't really matter, but that's the Aspen Institute, the Cato Institute, both very liberal. Gee, we'd be better off having one government across the planet kind of organizations. The Center for American Prosperity, hasn't been a socialist cause they've never not embraced. The Heritage Fund, the same thing. CIA, NSA, and Homeland Security. Isn't that interesting? Why would they take interest in a journalistic book projecting the future? Oh, that's interesting. CIA, I can understand. They've gotten involved in literature quite a bit. That would make an interesting show. I'll hold on to that for later, though. All right. The book has proven to be 90% accurate. 90% of what they were predicting, writing this in 1996, publishing it in 1997 with all this international input, the book has accurately forecasted 90% of what's here. And I'm going to go through a few of these things. I'm not going to hit all of them. Um, this is amazing. Famine. World War III will commence slowly. Well, we already see it, right? U.S. and in NATO and Europe with NATO against Russia, one part of it. The standoff with Taiwan, the takeover of Hong Kong by communist China. Thank you very much, UK. We had to sell those people out. And then we've got the situation in Iran. But even before that, we were making big enemies in the world with Iraq and Afghanistan. Now it's Iran, and that brings in, yeah, and then there was Venezuela, and we're hearing Cuba is not far off in the future. Exactly. So we're looking at this. This is all the beginnings of World War III. The pieces on the board are coming together, and I hope that it's going to be stopped, but it certainly has commenced. Okay, famine. Well, gee, let's just look at our own country. One out of four people, 26% in America, are malnourished. That's government figures. That's not private entity research. And for the children, it's even higher. We're approaching numbers that will soon be one third. And then we look at supply chain issues will become a problem. It's already happening. You're seeing more and more shortages and delays in shipment of medicine and food, and it's because of the war with Iran. Well, that's going to exacerbate greatly by the end of next month. And you heard it here, and you heard it here often. And I made this proclamation in the middle of May when I went on Kim Iverson's show. But before that, I was saying in January, if we get involved with the war with Iran, you better start stockpiling right away because you're going to have a day where you're not going to get what you need. Food, medicine, gasoline, and that day's coming. You think this so-called memorandum of understanding is going to hold? Yeah. Do you know that 90% plus of the people in Iran hate their government? And they hate their government for the same reasons we can't trust them. So we are in World War III mode. Um, here's one thing they predicted. Remember, this is 96 written, 97 published. Fast mutating pandemics. Let's just take COVID, just one example. How many times has this mutated that we've heard about? The year after, we were hearing about two new mutations, and there was another one the year after. So that's been validated. Now we know Ebola is mutating, and it is a problem in certain African countries. We had a little go around with this too ourselves in 2014. I think what 19 people were tested positive, small, but the Ebola we know is now mutating. And I'll just digress just for a moment. Research I have presented previously showed Canadian researchers and other researchers Ebola is not just transmitted by exchange of bodily fluids like sex or sweating on someone or sharing the same cup. The pathogen can stay active on inanimate places like door handles. I kid you not. Uh, Homeland Security even did a study that matches a Canadian study that said, sneezing, projecting microscopic particles out. If they're Ebola, they can infect you from as far as 27 feet away. Not my numbers, Homeland Security. The Canadian numbers were a little less, but it was the same basic deal. So we're seeing some evolution in Ebola, and you should expect it. That would happen with any virus. It's not going to be static forever. It will evolve. Why? Because it's trying to survive. And then we get into home working on a virtual basis will become a reality. Well, with COVID, what do we have people do, especially in the tech industry? Work from home, learn from home. Boy, education took a nosedive there, didn't it? But the learning from home model, very much exacerbated during the COVID lockdown years. And then we have vaccines based on biogenetic research. Smart IDs. What? You heard me. Smart IDs were predicted in 1996. We need it for crime, cyber crime. I don't know. But it's going to be used for a whole lot more. That'll be covered in more detail in a future piece we're going to do. Then you get into the World Health Organization will manage international management of potential pandemics and real pandemics. No one was predicting that very overtly in 1996. Today, we have seen it holistically. And this has even gone into the UN, and there's a marriage there with this. So that surprised a lot of people if you go back to 1996. And here's the big one. Ready? Little drum roll for this one here. Right? Are you ready? There's the drum roll if you picked it up. CDBC, central bank digital currency. What? Yeah, CBDC. Really? That was thought of in 1996 when they wrote this? Yes. Why? To prevent money laundering. Well, actually, if you go to the World Liberty Financial, we've already shown you within the last week how what they've opened up here is the potential for more money laundering. Yes, the speed of transactions will go faster, but the very checks and balances we put on enforcing sanctions and trying to stop money laundering from illicit activities like trafficking and drug smuggling, those are largely going to be ignored. We talked about how we'll link that video in the description. It's pretty amazing here when you look at this. Here's a big one. We're going to do a separate piece on this, and I'm hopeful we'll get to it in one of our segments today. Nuclear device and military weapons contamination, where you are more likely to die of combat pollution than you are of combat itself. And I was shocked when I did some research in this, how omnipresent this is. And we have a separate presentation just on that. This is huge. And they saw this 30 years ago. And I'm just learning about it within the last 6 months about how bad it is. I knew it was a potential issue. I didn't know it was an omnipresent problem. Pretty amazing stuff. Stay tuned on that one. Nanotech, yeah, I remember even Art Bell did a lot of shows on nanotechnology. People go, "Oh, Art, that's fun to listen to. You're so entertaining." But that crap's never going to happen. Nanotech. I was skeptical when I first heard it. It's real now, and we all know that. Um, I'm looking at more of these here, and I just they're kind of like repeating of the same themes, but surveillance to keep you safe. And that would bring in data centers, although I don't think data centers are specifically mentioned, but they talked about surveillance elements. Well, you need data to surveil, and all the data centers, okay, you get the idea. And they're tied into DARPA, right? And NASA. And so it's a global and near Earth orbit surveillance spy grid. They didn't call it that directly, but they did mention the elements you would need to put this together. Um, And then they talked repeatedly about famine. Okay, that's what's come true to some degree and a large degree. What hasn't come true, but looks like you can see it coming. See, with these first things, what was coming is no longer coming. It's already here. That's 90% of their predictions. The next thing is what's coming will soon be arriving on track number one. Are you ready for that? Stay tuned because we'll come back with more. Make sure you sign up for our newsletter at thecommonsenseshow.com, upper right-hand corner. Click on the newsletter link. Bing, you got it. And put in your email. You'll send you everything we do in the previous 24 hours. Also, too, check out our TV show, thecommonsenseshow.tv, where we do like things like the HIP series, Hiding in Plain Sight. People love that. And then we include some of our geopolitics and some of our interviews you may have missed. We put those up as well, all there for your enjoyment and education, mostly education.